Thank you, and thanks for being here this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about running our associations and clubs as official nonprofits and businesses. This is a little technical, so we're going to try to make it fun, and I really like presentations like this where we can talk to each other. I want you guys to talk to me. I want you to tell me what you already know. We'll go through that fast. I want to go over what you don't know and things you can help me about. That's really what makes these workshops fun. If you weren't there this morning, I'm Cheryl Goar, and I'm from Arizona, and I run the Arizona Nursery Association. So most of my experience is 20 years in trade associations. So that's where I've developed most of this information. If there's something there you want to know that's applicable, raise your hand. And for the Canadians, I've tried to cover it, but I don't know your law like I know the U.S. So let me know if there's something up here that's different, and we'll all share together, okay? So we're going to start out with the structure and governing documents, and these are really the tools that you need to effectively guide that club along. We've got to know how we're structured for several reasons for what we're doing, what our structure is, and then those tools for your club. Specifically this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about who governs your association. We're going to do the governing documents. What are those things you need? The nonprofit tax-exempt status that I'm sure a lot of you have. If you're smaller, you may have not gotten that yet. Different types of associations. And then in the end, Rena asked me to cover how to run effective meetings, because how many of you have meetings that go on and on? You've attended meetings and board meetings. So a little bit on helping to run effective meetings. I'm kind of a fan of books, and I'll tell you the Legal Guide for Association Board Members by James Seeley, S-E-E-L-Y, is fantastic. Small read, again, printed by the American Society of Association Execs. And then 10 Minutes to Better Board Meetings. So some of this stuff came out of both of those, and I have them up here if you'd like to see them. The impact of associations: we are big business. Associations, employment over 1 million. We receive over $33 billion in revenue and $56 billion in assets in 2009, and over 120,000 organizations. What this means in the U.S. is the IRS is not just not looking at us anymore. They're really looking at associations and clubs, looking at our tax returns, and seeing what we are doing. So we need to make sure that we're doing things to the best of our ability. I'm going to talk a little about the Internal Revenue Code. Some of this is going to be just for your broader knowledge. Everybody heard of C3s? 501c3s, charities. Those are the people we give money to. Substantially devoted to charitable, education, scientific, or religion. Those are the four things. 80 to 95% of what you do in your mission. They're sometimes called philanthropic organizations, and they're very restricted and limited in any of their political and lobbying activities. The next one is the C4. That's the social welfare, those advocacy groups, okay? They can lobby if it's related to their purpose, so they're not prohibited, but they can't lobby on anything. It has to have a direct relation to their purpose for civic betterment and social improvement. An example, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, would be a C4. Anyone out here is C4? What are you guys? So your snowmobiles are a C4, okay?
And we have a lobbyist. So.
And you have a lobbyist. You can only lobby on things related to snowmobiles, and the IRS probably watches that. You have to report that to your, I'm probably skipping ahead, but each year you have to report to your members how much of their dues goes toward that lobbying. That's a new thing we got to do. Ooh, fun. Sarbanes-Oxley in 2009 made a lot of changes to all of these IRS codes. And no matter which type you are, you have to disclose to your members the type of lobbying you're doing, how much you're doing. Could be 3%, could be 1%. Doesn't matter what the number is, you just have to be able to tell your members what you're doing. So a lot of changes. no matter which one you are. And also know that $25,000 budget or over must file a full 990 tax return every single year. I see a lot of heads shaking. I've been told there has been some smaller organizations that are required to do that. Now, my last information said it's 25,000 and under. Is that, anyone know any different on that? 25,000? You're all filing your 990s? Another thing about those 990s is you have to let any members see those that request to see them. Open for inspection. You can make them come to your office. You can, make them, but you have to have them available to them. Let's go on to the C6s. Must primarily more than 50% be devoted to the same business interest of the members. Must represent at least one line of business, and they're free to engage in unlimited legislative activity, and they're not prohibited from PACs. This is what I work for. The Arizona Nursery Association, a trade association, are mostly your C6s. Who are C6s? You guys? What's your association? Snowmobile. So the Snowmobile associations are different categories of nonprofits. That's interesting.
The downside of that is if I make a contribution as an individual to that association, it's not tax deductible for me.
Exactly. Very important point. I don't know if you could hear that. If he makes a personal contribution to that association, it's not tax deductible to him. Where back on the C3s, every donation is charity, except, and there is an exception, when you receive value back, like at a silent auction, you have to claim that. But your writing a check to a charity is deductible. On the C6s, your business can write it off as a business expense, but it's not deductible to the individuals. And it's the same business expense you take on anything, buying t-shirts or advertising. It's in that big business expense. If anybody's here for the manufacturers, I'm sure they're a C6. Does that make it clear? The other one that we don't use so much is the 5, the labor or ag organizations. The Farm Bureau is a member of a 5. Anybody else know any 5s? I think some Elks Lodges, 5s. 5 social or recreational, the 7s are the Elks Clubs. The social or recreational clubs. Are any of you guys 7s? You guys are a 7. Isn't that interesting? You're 7, Wisconsin?
I have set up 2 clubs within the last 6 to 8 months, and they were both opposed to 7.
7s. So you are coming here. So let's see. Social or recreational oriented, you meet that. Ordinary meeting implies that there must be club members. There must be commingling of the members for social, recreational, or similar purposes. You meet all those. So we have snowmobile clubs that are 4s, 5s, 6s, and 7s. That's interesting. So all across, and 3s, and a 3, 2 3s. Very 4. Okay, so I'm just out of my interest. Are the 3s incorporated the longest to go, maybe the oldest clubs? 68? Yeah. 69? I think they've gotten tougher on giving the 3 designations out. They're putting you in the other categories. Very interesting. So it doesn't matter what you are, just you need to know what your limitations are, and I'm just giving you the basics here. So your status is that you're exempt based on your IRS designation, and you must remain focused on that purpose, and that's what they're going to judge you on at some point. You got this letter. Everybody knows where that letter is, right? And they have it on file? That's a very, very important piece of paper to have. Good for you. You get asked for it every once in a while.
Absolutely. When you're looking for donations, software and stuff like TechSoup, you gotta come up with it.
When we do grants, we're always asked to attach that letter. Yeah, grants, absolutely, you have to have that letter. So if you have that, never, never, never let that get away. Scan a copy, keep that copy so you have that letter. It's very important. You don't want to have to go back to the IRS and talk to them about what you may or may not be. Those usually aren't great conversations to have. But they gave you that based on what you say you do. So every year you need to make sure that you're doing what you told the IRS you're doing, and therefore you keep your nonprofit status. Let's talk a little bit about UBIT, unrelated business income tax. Anybody ever had to pay this when you're not doing your exempt work? No examples? Okay. I'd say about 10 years ago, associations were looking for income sources that weren't just from dues, because we were all too dues dependent, and there comes a point where your members won't take that $10 increase or that $100 increase. So we all started thinking, well, what can we do? We'll, sell more magazine advertising, we'll publish books, we'll sell more t-shirts. There is a point where you're involved in something that is unrelated to your purpose, and that's where UBIT comes in. We think of it as a bad thing because we never want to say, oh gosh, I'm going to pay tax. That's not a happy day. Does anybody like April 15th? Probably not. But there are times when it would be profitable for your association to do something unrelated to get some money to your chapter or your club or your association. So don't think of it as never ever do it, but just be aware if you venture off into something else, you may have to pay tax on that portion of your income. But you do get to take your expenses against that you've paid for. So question?
An example of
The Pennsylvania Nursery Association actually started a for-profit, and they sold a bunch of books and magazines and almost like a publishing house, and they did it on purpose to make money, and it wasn't necessarily in their educational arena. Some of the magazines have been deemed, ours is very much what's going on and what we're doing. So anything that would be unrelated, and some associations actually have a for-profit division where they do some of these activities. I don't know if it's applicable or it would come up, but I just want it to be in your brain. If your club says, hey, we want to start doing a bake sale for some other reason or something, if it's a charity, if it's anything for yourself, but if it's truly unrelated, just think about UBIT.
so that merchandise or shirts and hats and gear that's all has your logo and stuff.
If you're going to have a trail ride, and that's your logo. We're talking if you get into big business where maybe your dues are $2,000 and this unrelated activity is $50,000. It's gonna use some red flags. But is it better to make 50 and pay a little bit of tax or not make it at all? So just be aware that you can do things that might not be within your tax exempt status. And then we talked about a $9.90 each year in the U.S. Do we have any Canadians in here? What do you guys file? Oh, it's a $9.90? How creative. The same? And is your exemption, doesn't matter. T2, you must file it. And over the 25,000, same as us or similar? Don't know? Everyone. So if I have a $500 nonprofit, I file. And do you have to have it open to your membership? Great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Is that 25,000 gross income or net profit?
Income. Income, not profit. Thanks. I didn't tell you to ask that, but let's talk about profits. Non-profit does not mean no profit. And if you have a board member that thinks that means no profit, I have several. They want to see that balance sheet always come out to zero. If we bring in $375,000 this year, we spend $375,000. They want to see a zero-based budget. That's great. That's fine. But you don't have to do that. What makes the difference is if you're using that money, the profit, so to speak, to go back in to your programs. And the difference between this and businesses is if you sit on a corporate board of directors, you can get paid and you get those dividends. We can't do that. This money that we make, if our trade show, if you have a trade show, is very profitable, that money can go back into the budget for next year, and maybe you have more member services. Maybe you do more education. Maybe you have better food at the banquet. Whatever it is, that money has to go back in to your programs. So is this, you guys make a profit each year? Does anybody have a problem with it? Yep, profit. Anyone have anybody on the board that thinks it's supposed to be zero-based? Yeah, yeah. It's a toughie, but know that nonprofit does not mean no profits, because how would you get, I mean, I'm a paid employee and I depend on this organization, and if they didn't have any money in the bank, it would be very difficult to recruit me, because if we have a bad year, paycheck bounces, you know. So savings are an all right thing to have, and in reinvesting in programs or in staff, great. Just make sure you're going back to that mission that we talked about. A little bit more about types of associations. The trade associations, Arizona Nursery Association, International Snowmobile Manufacturers, businesses who all have things in common. Professional associations, the American Society of Association Executives I talk about, as an association where everyone is in the same industry, the Association of CPAs. Philanthropic, we talked about, the Humane Society, American Cancer. Do you consider yourselves professional associations or trade? What would you, or philanthropic? You guys are philanthropic, the C3s, right? But do you consider yourself more of a professional because you're all, can I be a professional snowmobiler, or what would you consider yourselves? Trade? Trade? Everyone does the same thing? Yeah, you provide a lot of education. The professional societies, when they call themselves, usually, these are just designations on the type of association you might be. Not right or wrong, just gives you kind of a flavor of the broad aspects of associations. And then this one's kind of interesting. I don't know if you have horizontal and vertical associations in your industry. Horizontal, everyone one functional level, so like just people who manufacture. And then vertical are associations that service all levels of the industry. So the nursery association that I represent is vertical, because I represent the people who grow the plants, I represent the people who put the plants in the ground, and I represent the people who sell the plants at the retail level. So it's different types of associations. Horizontal, everyone's in the same industry or profession, and then vertical, several levels. If you have the retailers, the manufacturers, the growers, again, there's no right or wrong, just different types of associations and who make up those associations. Any questions with that? Then when you talk about federations, anyone a member of a federation? American Farm Bureau Federation, what are you a member of?
I'll just start
Local federation. And you? Schnagel County Federation. Okay. So there's bottom up and top down federations. And the difference are the way the dues are collected and the decisions. The bottom up means you sit at your local organization and you make decisions, and that flows up to the national. And the the American Farm Bureau is one that I'm familiar with. The state, you pay your dues to the state, and then they take a bit of the state's dues and send it off to the national. The American Society of Landscape Architects, absolutely the reverse. Everyone, no matter what state you're in, pays the National Association, and then they send a check back, a very small amount of their dues, back to each state, about $50 of their $250 back to the state. So they would be a top-down. Any examples of those that you guys, is yours top-down, you send your dues to the county then? And the county sends money to the state?
No, actually, ours is more like an association, actually.
Uh-huh.
You know, like they just named it a federation. It doesn't really
Yeah.
nice with that.
So maybe not top up or top down. Yeah, just two different ways to do business. Some people really like that local control that goes to the national, and you have a national association, but you choose to belong. Your chapter dues don't go automatically to them, correct? So if they did, you would be the bottom-up type of association. So that's types of associations. Any other questions there, I should say, and we'll go on to governing documents. Okay, this is what's super important. Articles of incorporation. The thing to remember is that's the agreement between the association and the state. The articles are what you have submitted, and I'm sure similar in Canada. That's what you told the state you'll be doing. Again, back to your mission. Your articles of incorporation are legally, this is where we elect our members, this is how, usually your bylaws are, their trend now is to make them much shorter, not have as many things in them. Bylaws used to say how many directors you would have. They might say the month of your annual meeting. Those are very archaic now, because if you change those articles, you have to actually file them with the Secretary of State, whatever the agency is in your state that you file those with. So that's very onerous. So the trend now for bylaws is to say there will be an annual meeting each year. We will have a board of directors range from, or up to a certain amount. That's the thing attorneys are liking now. Broad articles of incorporation, so you don't have to change them all the time. And the same thing, that's your legal existence. The bylaws are actually with your members, and we'll go to those next. Thank you. Yeah, the bylaws are an agreement between the members and the organization. So the articles, the state, your legal, your existence, the bylaws, you and your members, and tell you what to do. So the articles may just say this is the place of business, and this is where you're established and what you're established to do. Your bylaws then might be where it says the directors. They say a lot more. They tell the members who gets to vote, who doesn't get to vote, those types of issues. Again, associations are shortening even those so that we have policies and procedures that you can just change as things change. So the big thing here are your bylaws, or what you're telling your members you'll do, and the articles are what you've told the state you'll do. And the articles tie in to your nonprofit purpose as well. That's the difference between articles and bylaws. You probably publish your bylaws somewhere. Your members all have those, and probably only one person knows where the copy of your articles of incorporation are, right? Mine are on some horrible brown copy on microfilm. I'm sure they're, electronically available now, but we've got this old kind of file folder with your article. So, any questions between the articles and the bylaws? And if you're a leader like you are, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't, you need to kind of have a handle on where these are if you have staff, or even if you don't have staff. Make sure you know what your articles and your bylaws are, and that you're operating in concurrence with those. Question? It is actually, this is kind of it's a scary answer, but it's written in the bylaws how you change the bylaws. So you have to read your bylaws, and however it says you've told your members you'll change, that's how you change them. So there is no right or wrong answer. When you were incorporated and you formed several associations, correct? And did you write the bylaws differently for each, or kind of a model bylaw?
Just like a model bylaw, like basically, the ones I've been involved with, the bylaws can only be changed at the annual meeting.
At the annual meeting. And usually voted on the majority. You'll see now a lot of times the majority of the members present. Do you know what that means? That means the active members are making all the decisions, because darn it, we can't get a majority of our membership. We talked earlier about time. We can't get them. And if the only way we could conduct business was a majority of our actually fully paid membership, never get anything done. Our homeowners association would never get anything done. They even buy us pizza and we don't come. Yes? Proxies? Proxies will be in your bylaws. It'll say whether you can accept proxies or you can't. We talked about e-communication this morning. That's one I've been reading a lot about. Some bylaws allow for conference call meetings. Some bylaws don't allow for that. They allow for electronic votes, emails, all that stuff you have to either fix in your bylaws or have a policy or a procedure. Think about that technology that we talked about earlier. Is there something that you should do? I mean, is it okay to have a board of director on a conference call? It's very different dynamic when there's 7 people in a room and the one person is represented on this phone. If you've ever been that person and tried to listen, and it's tough. But think about those things. But it should say how you can legally vote, unless your board adopts it as a procedure and written procedure and puts it in a book. Any other questions on that? So bylaws and articles, that's the difference. If you ever take a test on nonprofits, that's going to be on there. You'll all get it right. Yes?
We have a set of bylaws also that states in there that the operation is according to Robert's Rules of Order.
Robert's Rules of Order.
And part of that is that it does not recognize meetings by email.
Okay. And that's probably, has that been changed or updated? I don't know. I know they revise it.
The Roberts is current.
And they say do not accept email voting.
Recognize meetings held by email.
I think it's the same for contracts. Arizona represents faxed copies, or no, maybe they don't do fax, but they do email. It's whatever legal. Yeah, you can decide what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. Yes.
You can, in your bylaws, you can deviate from Robert's rules as long as you specify this is what we're doing, and everything else will be according to Robert's rules.
Now, can I do that as a policy or procedure, or would I actually have to put that in my bylaws and go by the members?
I believe that we put that in our bylaws.
You did.
We do allow emergency e-voting
Okay.
on various issues.
Okay. And that may come in.
Because we
Yeah.
only do it once per month.
Right. And then there's probably something in there that the president can call an emergency meeting upon meeting certain standards as well. Yeah. So read the bylaws, especially, and we're amongst friends here, if you're not happy with what's going on at the club, make sure you read those bylaws. Is everyone getting the notice? Is everyone getting the information they should have? I know everybody's happy and perfect in all of our associations, but once in a while they might not. So, yes?
What's the difference between a bylaw and procedure?
Here's how I think of it. Articles are here, bylaws are here, and then your policies and procedures are here. So in our association, the policies and procedures may be of the operational duties I can just write with the staff, but the board of directors, we have policies and procedures that we go through as a board, and we adopt those. So they're sort of the third level of guidance. They're mostly just written upon some vote at that time, not really filed anywhere.
But there's nothing like concrete that says that's a procedure and that's bylaw.
Well, the bylaws would be concrete. They're an actual document. But usually they're called a policy and procedure manual. You may not even have that for a smaller club. And usually you get those policies and procedures when you end up having multiple staff offices. Do we have anybody here with more than like 2 staff? Paid? You guys? How many do you have? 3. Okay. Any really large staffs here? No? 2, 3? Yeah. It's all right there. And this is good stuff. I mean, this should be public. This should be for our protection. Let's go on to the structure. The board of directors, an organized group, most generally organized, whose authority is collectively to control and foster the institution. That's the word I put in green, and that's the one I want you to remember. Board of directors' authority is only collectively given to the organization. And everyone has probably had, I had a president who just outright told me, I'd rather be king, can you get me a crown? Independent nursery garden center owner, and they're called independent for a reason, and he was used to running the show. He owns his own business. He's in charge of his business, and darn it, if I'm going to spend $2,000, I'm just going to spend it. It was very, very difficult to get him to understand that he couldn't just tell me what to do if it was a large, item or a change. So board of directors collectively have to make those decisions. That doesn't say unanimously, but it just says collectively. Yes?
A question on balance sheets and financial statements.
Okay.
On a 501c3, well, any of the 501s, are you required to give your balance sheets to your members, or can you have, the board of directors control who gets those?
The financial information that's in the 990 has to be given to your members. But I believe that is all you are legally bound to give your member. I can't think of a situation where it would be in your best interest to maybe not give them that. We have, our board of directors meetings are open if a member wanted to attend. I don't know that I would necessarily give them a full board packet, but they would hear that conversation. So I don't think you would legally have to give them the balance sheet that we do every month, but you have to give them enough financial information, because your 990 will say all your meeting income, all your salary, it'll give you the totals. Anyone have a differing opinion? You agree? It's public. I just don't know if you have to give them like the May financial. I don't know why you would say no if it's truly a member. The 990 has the aggregate. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah. You don't see the breakdown. Yeah. Yeah. I just can't imagine there wouldn't be a reason I would show it, because then it assumes that you're trying to hide something. You know, you're going to be guilt by not. Go ahead.
But the important thing to remember is your 990s may not match your annual budget if you run a different fiscal year than the calendar year, and it may mislead your members.
Absolutely. Make sure you know what you're reporting. If your 990 is a calendar January to December, or if you've opted to file differently and put that paperwork in. We used to be on a fiscal year, and it was October to September. Drove me crazy. So if gosh, several years ago, we changed to a calendar year. All the governments here run on different fiscal. Federal has one, state has another. So yes, you're absolutely right. Make sure if you do show it to someone, please, try to say, hey, can I help you, and explain through it, because I'm telling you, the thickness of the 990 now, my CPA, I don't even know that I understand everything and how he came up with the numbers, because it doesn't look like we're used to seeing on that monthly balance sheet.
Which is why we, at our annual meeting,
okay,
they get the auditor's report as well as the treasurer's report, which reports the fiscal year.
Good.
Of the organization.
Don, I couldn't hear you.
We report at our annual meeting. They get both the auditor's report as well as the treasurer's report based on the fiscal year of the organization.
Okay, do you provide that, I'm sorry, do you provide that in writing, or do you provide the verbal report?
We, in writing and on disc in every different way.
To your whole membership, or just your leadership?
Our whole membership is there for everyone to see. Because we have an annual meeting where we almost have like stockholders meeting.
Okay.
Our stockholders are all our clubs. Clubs are, but we have regional directors, but the clubs at that stockholder meeting, we give them just like a stockholders report. They see it all.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better to just be completely transparent and show them if you've had a bad year, you've had a bad year. We lost money last year. We knew we were going to lose money. We knew our industry was in dire straits, and so we had, I think, a $25,000 deficit. We showed them, we justified it, and we knew it was coming. So, yes.
The old quagmire thing, I apologize for taking time.
No problem.
With a large organization like what we actually had a few years ago where one of our balance sheets got into the hands of the advertiser on the internet.
Oh.
And it was not good.
Dang, it's that technology thing again. That's what, if you think anything can't be scanned and posted, we've really got to figure out how this works in our world.
Yes, we're trying to figure out
Yeah.
a fair, reasonable way to control that.
Absolutely. Okay, the staff or just the employees of the association, we're probably clear on that. The executive director, if you're fortunate enough to have someone whose job every day is to run your club and association rather than someone after they do their job. They report to the board of directors, they manage, and if you can keep them doing the day-to-day operations and you can keep your board doing the visioning and where we're headed. I like to say they tell me we're going to build a clock, and then I figure out how to do it. You're going to put on a conference, I figure that part out. They figure out that the conference is in our best interest. So if you kind of define those roles, it actually helps. And the way I just like to see it is the executive director is the day-to-day, and the board is the vision. The board is the policy. The board is what we're going to operate in. Then we have committees, or some people are calling them task forces now because it sounds like you won't be together that long. I think that's why we use that. But remember, the only reason you need a committee or a task force, I love this, is when an individual can't do the job alone. Don't think it's not okay to say, Randy, will you please chair the silent auction? If Randy can do it on his own, why are we going to try to get 15 people together and try to get them to agree? So committees are fabulous, and when you need more people to do a task, use a committee, use a task force, but it's really when one person can't do it. And remember that those committees make those recommendations. In most things, the committees just make the recommendation, then the board spends the money, the board authorizes the expenditure, and they're advising to the board. Let's talk just a little bit more about the mission, because that is what granted your nonprofit status. I'll get you just next, okay? I think I missed your hand, or was it about?
I'd like to have you go back.
Okay.
We have a situation where we have the board of directors and we have an elected executive board.
Okay.
Now, then we also have committees. So where does this fit into your explanation?
Where does the executive, so the committee's here, the board is over the committees, and then the executive committee is a subset of your board?
Yes.
And probably the top officers?
Yes.
Okay, then they're probably defined in your bylaws of what decisions they can and cannot make. And I will tell you right now, in ours, when I took over, our executive committee met every other month, and the board met every other month. And the executive committee was like, what are we doing? Because everything we do goes back to the board. So the only thing my executive committee does right now is personnel, for two reasons. Privacy, they know my salary, and they evaluate me. And if you've ever wanted to be evaluated by a group of 16 people, no. I'm much more comfortable with 4. So your executive committee has to be empowered for what they can do. But I'll give you another example. The Arizona Cotton Growers Association has a board of 42 people. That's what they call their board of directors. They get together once a year. They're operated by their executive committee, which is 10. So they're more similar to my organization in the board size. But your executive committee needs to know what they can and cannot do without the full board permission.
That's where we have our board of directors meets 4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we are set up at the executive board, which are the elected officers,
Mm-hmm.
actually are the ones that are divided in our bylaws as to the operation
Okay.
of the organization.
So there you go.
Committees are under them.
Mm-hmm. And that's perfect, and that's fine, because what you just said is that's defined in your bylaws. That's the key. So if I'm a member and I get out my little bylaws, I see, oh wow, the executive committee can spend money without the rest of the directors. So that's what the key is. Thank you for bringing up executive committees. The mission is usually also found in your bylaws, and remember, it's the reason that the IRS granted your tax exemption. So once a year at our strategic planning meeting, we just go over, is what we're doing right now still all in our mission? Make sure that it is. They call it mission creep. You start going in a direction that you really weren't supposed to be in. So just do that, and make sure if you don't have a mission, write a vision, get together, have your board do some strategic planning. It really helps. I gave you ours this morning. Not rocket science, dedicated approachment and advancement of the nursery industry and the public they serve. Alberta Snowmobile, are you here? I found yours on the internet. Love that one. Working for improved access for snowmobile recreation, conservation of nature, and cooperation with land users and land managers. Sounds to me like they're doing some good work. Is that similar to any of yours? Similar? Yeah? Love that internet. So most associations use a combination, like you just said, to accomplish their goals. And they should accomplish the things for members. This is another little litmus test. Things for members that members can't do themselves. Make the pie bigger, especially in trade associations. If we make things better, all the companies rise. If you do something better with your association, all of the members get the benefit, whether it's a new trail, a new bridge, something that you can do. It's better for everyone. And where sometimes associations get into trouble is they try to do things that are for one individual, or there's something that they might be competing with one of their members. That's why we don't sell plants at the association. If I get a phone call that asks, how do I grow a bougainvillea, I say, I don't know, because truly I don't know. But also, that's not what we are in business to do. We're there to send people to our members. So think about that. Are you doing the work that a member should do, or that it takes a group of people to do? And I really like this. Management is the process of working with and through others to achieve those organizational objectives. It's definitely working through and with others. That's all we do in associations. There's rarely those things where one person has to do it all. So a little bit more about board composition. Just make sure that you're paying attention to that board size. A board of 42 people is probably not manageable. And a board of 2 is probably too small. So you should probably be somewhere in between. If you actually get the book I held up, The Race for Relevance, this morning, one of the radical changes they say is never have a board of more than 6. You know, their reasoning makes sense, but I don't know if we're all ready for it. But the one thing they said is don't live and die by these geographical representations of your state, your province, or your national, or live and die by we have to have one retail member, we have to have one wholesale member, we have to have one recreational rider. Because what this book says is you end up just getting people who fill geographical or trade niches, and you don't get the best people or the skills that your board needs. You may need a really good fundraiser. You may need a really good speaker if you have a speakers bureau or something like that. That may not be filled because it has to come from Western Massachusetts or because it has to be a snowmobile manufacturer. So if you're interested in that book, there's an entire section on dissecting your board and getting rid of large numbers. And then you have to remember the reason that people are on the board. They want that sense of community. So when you talk about working collectively, people really don't join boards if they're just isolated loners. They really want to be, in most cases, a part of that community. And then succession and recruitment. We talked a lot about that in the session yesterday that I was in. How are we going to get these future leaders and how are we going to recruit them? Your board needs to be thinking about that. There's a 1/3 rule of the board, so everybody picture their board right now. And I bet you 1/3 are active and contribute a lot. 1/3 are reasonably active. They come to meetings, but they probably don't do a lot. And then 1/3 probably don't attend or aren't involved. Does that look like your club? 1/3, 1/3, 1/3? Anybody lucky to have better? You guys have a lot better? A lot better. Good for you. Good for you. 50% active, more than 100? Better than that. Better, 100%?
10 out of 12, just about every time.
10 out of 12. That's perfect. Okay, we're going to have a session after this, and you're going to tell us how to do that, okay? Because that is not the norm. It's just the way boards are. 3rd rule of boards. That's great. So I'm betting you have effective, good structure, well-written documents, your bylaws, your articles, and defined board and staff responsibilities. These are the things we just talked about. This is what you have to have so you can go down the path working really well together. I talked a little bit about legal. Again, I apologize to Canada. This is not Canadian law, but this is in the United States Board of Directors. They always ask me, what do I have to be doing? What if I miss a board meeting, if I don't attend for a while, what do I have to do? This is the legal standard. The duty of care is a standard that requires a board member to exercise the same care that an ordinary, prudent person would exercise in a like position or under similar circumstances. So you're basically judged by your peers. It means that board members should attend board meetings and be informed about the activities in order to be able to make that informed and independent decision. All the state and national laws differ on the degree of care required, but it's basically Are you informed enough to make that decision? So whatever, you know the law, it's going to be fuzzy so we can have attorneys figure out what it really means. But that is the same care as an ordinary prudent person. The duty of loyalty means that a board member acts in good faith, to be faithful to the organization, and is pursuing the organizational's best interest. And they should always put the interest of the organization above their personal. So on my board, an example would be if we wanted to really do more education for retail nurseries, and I had a board member who's like, I educate my own people, don't go there, and he consistently voted no against the programming, even though it was for the best interest of the board. That would not be exercising the duty of loyalty, because in that meeting, he takes off his hat of his personal nursery, and you put on your hat of a board member. So if 8 out of 10 board members think that another ride is a good idea and you think they're crazy, if it's really makes sense financially, you have the funds, sometimes you have to say, well, I might not be interested, but it's in the best interest of the association. And conversely, even if it sounds like the best party ever and it's going to be a wonderful casino night, but you know that there's a risk that your financials just don't look like you should be taking, that's your duty of loyalty and duty of care. And then obedience requires the board to act with the organization's rules and policies in furtherance of its goals, the mission, the articles, and the bylaws, and that you're complying with all the state and federal laws. So that's kind of what you have to do. It's not attend 4 out of 5 board meetings. It's not like that. But pretty much, I think all my people are in this realm. If they're not, you probably should talk to them. And if you want more, this legal guide, tons more in it. The board determines the mission and purpose. The staff, if you have any, review plans for the future, gets the financial resources, and also works on the public image. It's really the board to set the tone for if your organization looks like a very educational, a very social, a very networking, whatever it is. The board decides that. I'm going to go through this because I want to get into meetings. We all have lots of different funding sources. We talk about that. You probably have more than just dues. You have other events throughout the year. There can be lots of different things. And then lots of times you do things in legislative and regulatory. Does everyone do something in that? Sometimes not? Okay. Promotional, you promote your events. I'm sure you network in social. You guys have been fun people this whole week. Education and professional development, I know that's been what's going on here, hazards, trails, those kinds of areas. Some people have standards and code of ethics. Do you have code of ethics? A responsible snowmobiler will always 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? No? You have some of those? Yeah. We used to have that. We don't promote that anymore, and it's simply a national thing here in the United States. A lot of associations have been sued because of their code of ethics, and it's because someone in your association is not adhering, and who wants to sue a member? It's just not a good place to go. We have it. It is in a drawer. If anybody wants to see it, they have it, but we don't promote that all the time. And maybe it's because we sell things with prices on them, the retail aspect, we don't do that. Lots of people don't print their code of ethics anymore just because of legal reasons. Information, research, and statistics, really popular. You guys have great statistics on your association, and this is something we do for the nurseries as well. People love that information. And then a forum to discuss the common problems, and gosh, that's exactly what you guys are doing here. So, let's talk a little bit about meetings. Meetings are the place where you revise, you update, and you add to your knowledge. They allow the members to share their perspective, get a common understanding, coordination, and then you allocate your resources. You do these in meetings. If you don't need to do one of these bullet points, don't have a meeting just to have it. Unless, of course, you're required by your bylaws to have so many meetings. You like that?
Yes, right answer.
Don't meet just to meet. Has anybody just dying to have another meeting? Yes?
If you're a 501 status, are some of your corporate
I don't think, unless it's in your bylaws, we have a policy that any member can sit in but not vote. But I don't think there's any law that says anything has to be open. In our state of Arizona, the open meeting laws all belong to public entities, governmental entities. I don't know if any other state's different on the definition of open meetings to members. It's just, again, it's probably in your best interest to let them watch or sit in. They certainly don't have to vote. They don't have to have the packet, any of that. But it would probably make you think maybe you're doing something you wouldn't want your members to see. It's just perception is reality, even though I'm sure.
Well, the only problem again is that I think everybody here knows what some of the things politically has gone on in Wisconsin. You know, with media attending your meetings and that camera on. And
Yeah.
like that.
Now, media is another thing that I think you would have to do. I don't think there's going to be any bylaw that says anything about media. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anybody know? That's going to be, to me, that's going to be the policy and procedures. Our board has adopted a policy and procedure that no media are allowed at our board meetings, and I would do it not the day before the media wants to come. I would have it.
Public interaction does not affect your 501 status.
Not public. I think if you were denying member after member attendance, I think somebody would raise a red flag. But if just a member of the general public, I can't think of a reason that they would have to have access. All those things we talked about, 990s, that's to your members. Remember, we work for our members. We do what our mission says. So, reasons to have meetings. And then determine the purpose of the meeting and who will be the chair, and develop an agenda. I had a very wise lady tell me once, she was probably 90 years old. She says, I will never attend a meeting that does not have an agenda. If I walk in, I walk out. And I'm telling you, this lady did. And I bet she did it all 90 of her years. So it really does help. Have an agenda. I actually put a time frame to the left of everything on my agenda, and then when you have a meeting, people tend to think you're running behind, even though you're really not, because executive directors just sit in our little room and put these times on there and estimate them. But it makes people move along. It also, if you walk in and you see, my gosh, this session's going to be over at noon, you're like, okay, I expect to be over at noon, and you're respectful of people's times. And then also, this one is really good. If there's anything you can distribute prior to the meeting, whether it's email, whether you can fax it, whether you mail a packet, it helps so much. Our board members, if Cheryl's having a good week, always get it 3 days by email in advance of the board meeting so they can review and look at it. It also helps, I'll tell you, it helps the person who's reporting, because if somebody catches an error in my financial, I admit it, I've made one or two, you don't get embarrassed in front of 12 people. You fix it prior to the meeting. So if you can possibly do that, it's not only expedient, but it helps. If you're a participant or a board of director, make sure you read that material. That goes back to the duty of care. Be on time, limit side conversations, basic stuff. At our long-range planning, when our guys get off on tangents and just start talking, we never get finished. So do that. Listen. Listen is a big one. Sometimes that gets tough when there's people on the board expressing an opinion that you don't agree with. Speak up and contribute your point of view. That's why you're on there. Who has to chair their board meetings or their club meetings? Anybody? Lots of you. You already mentioned Robert's Rule of Order. Very good if you can do that. Focus on the energy, keep it moving. I mean, let everyone speak, but make sure you're moving forward. And then make sure that time, again, be respectful of people's time. And you're really there to make sure that everyone gets to speak, but not only that, that people understand the issue. I've seen board meetings where everybody's talking about something and the president goes, wait a minute, I don't think you understand the motion on the table, or I don't think you completely understand what we're talking about. The chair needs to make sure that people know what you're voting on. That's your responsibility. And then also, you're going to be responsible if Larry and Sam talk the entire meeting and Sally's never gotten to say a word. You are responsible for cutting off the person who's going on and saying, wait a minute, one comment from everyone before we're going to go back to you. So that's done all the time. do that as a way to make sure everyone gets heard. Use parliamentary procedure, and I love what you added. Put in your bylaws if you're not going to follow it, and these are the instances we're not going to follow it. Executive sessions, anyone do this? It's mostly in government, but you can have an executive session where the staff leaves, everyone leaves the meeting room. It's just the executive, the board or the executive committee. The only issue can be discussed is the one you called it for, and usually that's going to be personnel. 9 times out of 10, it's a personnel issue. And those minutes are confidential, because it negates the whole thing if you show those to the members. So you have to have a procedure for calling the executive session. You have to say it's for personnel issues or it's for this issue. Everyone leaves, and those minutes are also confidential. The president should keep those minutes.
One question on that.
Yes?
You have to record any motion and vote taken and make that public?
You would have to record the vote taken, but public no, because it's only with the members who were there. Now, usually these are called when it's not a happy situation. You normally don't call an executive director, and they're normally to get rid of staff. To put it on the table, that's in associations or to unseat a president. They're usually not called when everyone's happy. I could put it that way. Does that make sense? They're usually when you need to have a private discussion. So usually the action will be seen in a different way rather than getting a copy of those minutes. It will be seen. Yes?
Are board members open to the membership? They sit in and listen but not participate, or
Executive sessions are for executive people. So if the I sit on a Project Central board of directors, and when an executive director is called by our executive session by our president, it's just the board of directors. It's whoever the meeting was with. Yeah. In our association, yes, because that's our policy. Not vote, but attend. I gave you a sample agenda. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, when you mentioned somebody keeps a record of this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that record go?
I
mean, I think you mentioned like the president.
Yes.
Or the president of the board.
Yeah.
The record of it.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that's on the board is privy to that information. He keeps the information.
The president should keep that. The president should seriously have, if you are the president of an organization, you should have a file folder or two just for that kind of information. Lots of times staff are expected to have everything, but if I'm president, I'm going to have a copy of a lot of things with me, and that's where that should go.
The record is kept by the president.
By the president, right. Official document of the association, not to be shared with anyone who was not privy to that. Now, the one exception is if the board member was not present at the executive session, you can show it to an equal board member to you who would have been there, eligible to be there, but just was not present.
Now, let me ask another question.
Okay?
If it's an executive session, say it's dealing with somebody's salary.
Yes.
And the executive session, I guess what you're saying, would take a vote and say they've approved it or they agree with it or whatever that may be.
Right.
You go out of executive session to confirm that.
Yes, to the board.
So your regular board
Yeah.
would then be in a position to take a vote on
Right.
the subject.
And you wouldn't talk about how you got there. You wouldn't talk about what Cheryl did, what Cheryl didn't do. All you would do is say, we have a new budget item. Our salary number for next year is $283,000 for Cheryl. And, and then they vote it down. Go ahead.
I'm under the impression you cannot vote in executive session.
You can take action in an executive session. Yes, if you have the proper people in the room with the proper authority, like when he talked about his executive committee.
Right. You're saying you can't vote, you can't
He would have to take it back to the board of directors to approve salary. In my case, the board of directors doesn't approve salary, so the 3 people, the personnel committee, do that, but they don't even do that in executive session. I don't want you guys to go out of here and start calling executive sessions. They're not used much. I just kind of wanted to give you an overview of tools you have. But I've seen 2 executive sessions probably in the last 5 years.
So
Go ahead.
Recommending that decision can't be taken in that executive
Yes.
recommending the decision. And then it gets carried outside that room.
Yeah. Probably a consensus would happen in the executive session. I don't think there's anything about voting. I haven't, read 10 novels on this, but these are pretty much the basics. If you're going to have one and you have any doubt at all, find out exactly, and especially if your state has any. We usually see these again, governmental, cities do them all the time. You'll see town boards, town councils. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, when they don't want the village, the rank and file to find out what they're up to.
Exactly. So that's why I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying you usually don't call them when you're all totally happy. So anyway, gave you a sample agenda here, and these will be posted if you want to see. The only thing I'm going to talk about is that consent agenda. Is anyone using a consent agenda? Okay, we're not either. Oh, you are? Okay. Do you like it?
In our annual meeting, yes.
Uh-huh. They're pretty cool. A consent agenda means you have a lot of things that are just written out, sent out ahead of time. They're usual, normal business practices that you just are legally have to approve. And you send those out, and these items are going to be on our consent agenda. And then here's the other agenda. Any board member at the beginning of that meeting can make a motion to remove anything from the consent agenda and move it to the regular agenda. So you still have the ability to discuss something if you want to, but a consent agenda will have one vote up or down for the entire items. I'm thinking about trying it because it just sounds like I'm with you. I don't want any more meetings. So if this can be, normal things that you don't really have to, you do them all the time, but they require a vote. So things you normally put on there real quick. Can you give me one or two?
I was mistaken. We didn't. What we did this year in our annual meeting is we accepted reports as opposed to voting on approving reports.
Sure. You can put reports.
That was wrong in my definition.
Yeah.
What you were talking about.
Farm Bureau does this now in our local. You get all these written reports, and they're just approved or disapproved, and if you want to talk about it, you move it. So think about items you could do that are just routine in nature that you could do. It might move it along. It might not fit, but it's a tool you have. A little bit about committee minutes. Make sure the date, time, and place, the members present and the members absent. A lot of people don't do that. Don't just write down who was there, write who was not there. Actions taken, we have again been advised legally, don't write, Rena just told Cheryl that she thought it was a good idea. Mark said maybe it wasn't a good idea. Phil said not that. You don't want everybody saying everything. Really, the motions, the board of directors decided it was in the best interest of the organization to discontinue the annual casino night on a motion made by Scott and seconded by Phil. That's what you want, because you want to go back to that and know what action was taken, but not all the discussion. Sarah loves the casino night and cried. No, none of that. Okay, so I know this was a lot, but I wanted to tell you this is to build greatness to last in your association and club. And again, we don't just want you to exist, we want to work to build that to last. And Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about focus on the clock building, not the time telling. And what we just talked about here is how to build that clock. You built your clock with good bylaws and your articles are up to date and you're sending in your IRS papers and you're filling out your forms and you're making good meetings. You're building the clock so then anybody can come in and tell the time because you've got the structure. So make sure you think about these things. They sound trite, but they're super important because once you get all this together, then you can go forward, preserve that core, and then stimulate your progress. So I thank you for going through all of this and taking time to maybe spruce up some things for your organization. We're 5 minutes over, so any questions, I'll be in Speakers Unplugged and anything you want to share with me, and thank you again. Really